Okay, we are live. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is the 9th webinar in our ongoing series at Lab Central, Innovation and Biotech in the Time of COVID-19. I'm Johannes Frühhoff, CEO and founder of Lab Central, and I'm thrilled to be joined this afternoon by a panel of great industry leaders whose names and profiles you see on the screen. Let me start by introducing the panelists. We have Aaron Schwartz, who is the director at Novo Nordisk Search and Evaluation Team. And Aaron is a sponsor here through Novo Nordisk, also at Lab Central. Thank you for arranging that when you joined Novo, so that was great. And we invited him on this panel because Aaron also for many years was part of the MIT licensing office. And today's topic, of course, is tech transfer and company creation, most of all. So Aaron, thank you for joining us. We also have Mike Fenn, who is the Director of Life Sciences and Healthcare at the Harvard Innovation Labs. And over there, he's our counterpart and partner because Lab Central operates the Harvard Life Lab in conjunction with the iLab team over there. Mike's background is also that of a professor and scientist, and he previously was a professor at Florida Institute of Technology, focusing on biophotonics and medical materials. And he explicitly came to Boston to join our innovative and entrepreneurial ecosystem. So we appreciate that, and we hope it's worth the journey to Boston. And last but not least, Michal Preminger, who is the head of Johnson & Johnson's Innovation Center here in Boston, where she leads a significant sized team for partnering and entrepreneurial partnership with J&J. And previously, Michal led for many years the Harvard Tech Transfer Office, where we collaborated with her to set up this fabulous series of events that we call Guppy Tanks, where we bring in academic founders or founders to be and have the audience comment and ask questions and give these team guidance as to how their technologies should be translated into companies. And that's been a very successful feature that I'm very grateful because it was your idea, Michal. So thank you all three for joining our panel this afternoon. And maybe to kick it off, Michal, I'll ask you to describe a little bit what in your new role, what your office does at J&J Innovation, and how, if at all, the COVID crisis has impacted your practice over there. You're on mute. Michal, you're on mute.
This is the one sentence that we will all remember from COVID-19. You're on mute, or you're still on mute. Thank you, Johannes, and it's great to be on this panel with such good friends too. I think by mentioning the Guppy Tank, you kind of set me on kind of track to share my passion for connecting science to purpose, which is what I've kind of spent my career doing. Definitely at Harvard, and before that in biotech and tech, and now at J&J. So J&J is the biggest healthcare company in the world and most diverse, serving 1 billion people every day. And the J&J Innovation was actually created to become that place in which external innovation can find its way into this large and complicated, to some extent, company, and it brought together the pieces that are necessary to help innovators accelerate and put their innovation on track to find its way and consumers. So we have created locations around the world to make sure that innovators don't have to go to us, to our headquarters, or find our locations, and where we can connect directly with young companies, with academics, with people who are passionate about new ideas and technologies and serve them with the tools that are needed. So basically leverage the large company resources, but bring them close to where they're needed, whether these are connections to our R&D capabilities, whether there is a need for investment and equity investment. We have the ability to do that through a corporate venture fund, which is part of J&J Innovation, and incubation, as in Lab Central and other locations we call J-Labs around the world. And what we try to do is a little bit like precision medicine. It's basically learning about what the entrepreneurs, the investors, the academics are really looking for, what their vision is for their technology and science, and how we can help and design the right partnership structure and deal structure to actually help, again, accelerate and bring to patients. So that's what we do in normal times. I'm thinking that I just said, bring to the location, and now we have no location anymore. So this is kind of an interesting time in which we can, to some extent, erase geographical boundaries and reach more broadly to everyone. But we still appreciate the benefits of our own ecosystem. So we can talk maybe a little bit about that later.
Yeah, I think that, I remember when J&J made the decision to come to Kendall Square, it was a big move, right? This organization used to be in New Jersey, and that's where all the big pharmas are. And I think that alongside with many of the other pharmas locating to Cambridge, at least a presence, if not the headquarters, it was a big endorsement of the value that this entrepreneurial group of activities bring also to big pharma. Aaron, I'm sure you have a similar view there, having been part of the academic ecosystem and now, of course, being in charge of search and evaluation. Tell us a little bit about how you manage this new role at Novo, and how also the current world, right? Like how the current world is impacting that. Ultimately, we want to derive out of your insights guidance for our entrepreneurs on how they can meet you and your peers during this difficult time.
Sure, and thanks again for inviting me to be on the panel, Johannes. I really appreciate it. So I think that a couple things is first, in terms of how to meet us, just drop us an email, find us on LinkedIn. Always happy to chat with people. And as as we talk about tech transfer and talk about what companies look for, I think one of the big themes I've learned and appreciated on the company side is a little bit about the needing to understand your customer really early on, meaning a pharma if you're a startup or an early stage company, and what they're looking for. But we'll probably touch on that a little further, so I don't want to take away from another question. But what's been happening now and in the during the COVID-19 situation. So I think we're very fortunate in the sense that, for those who don't know Novo Nordisk on the call, and we're not a big player like J&J in town, not yet. We hope to be at some point. So something to aspire to.
Your leadership, Aaron.
There we go. Exactly. Michal, both in by company and by the leader of the Innovation Center as well. Something to aspire to. I think business has gone on, right? I think that we're based in Denmark, and we were set up here as a way to really tap into the innovation in Boston. We recently acquired Corvidia for their antibody for kidney disease, and that was just announced a couple weeks ago, right? So BD can go on in the environment, not being able to be in the same room, essentially. Not ideal, but it can go on. We just participated in digital bio. Again, it's not as productive, I felt, but to some degree, it also, what I think is really interesting is that it's now to some degree made it a level playing field, in the sense that to Johannes's point is and Michal's point, before it was you had to be somewhere to make things happen. But now, right now, if there's an interesting company that maybe we wouldn't have looked at before, we're a little more, sort of, if I talk to you on Zoom, if you're in Boston or Boise, Iowa, it doesn't really make a difference, right? It's where's the interesting science. So I think that's really good. I think the third thing that we benefited from is that actually Denmark has now opened up almost completely, which sort of from the research point of view has been very beneficial to the company, and also for us being able to move things forward if we're going to be sort of bringing projects in-house through some sort of relationship. Then that's a nice thing, that it's not sort of, well, we'll wait and see if we open up. We're open now, and all hope is that it continues to be that way. And I think I would see the one downside is, I think for some of the smaller companies, it's been hard to make progress in these times, in terms of they can have the BD discussions, but sort of seeing the data readouts, that you either don't have as many people in the lab, or you don't have the ability to kind of get into bigger space, whatever it is. So I think that's been a little bit of a hit for the smaller companies. But I think in general, it's been very encouraging to see that our industry as a whole, and I would say that's both academics and biotechs and pharma, have been incredibly resilient. And I think that really is something that I take as a positive. And I'm not even going to go into the whole contribution that our industry has made to COVID in terms of trying to find solutions, which is that could be a whole nother discussion. But I think we've been resilient on all fronts, both in the COVID cures, but also our normal areas of interest for therapeutics.
Yeah, I think it's really great for the industry that this catastrophe is not one in a different area. It's helpful, let's put it that way, that the value of healthcare innovation is made abundantly clear to all participants, be they politicians or voters or payers or participants in sort of the public discourse on drug payments. I think we see that as a big sort of advantage and helpful to put things in perspective. Michal, at the iLab, I know that you have many young teams, and really at the beginning of their entrepreneurial journey. But I know that some of them have already picked up this COVID call and have pivoted to, maybe they had an original technology that went to a different area, but they've been able to adjust that, or they're working on that. Are you in touch with these teams, and how are they making these decisions?
Yeah, we've had a couple of teams that were really focused on technology that were quite related, before COVID, and kind of were at the right place at right time, just working on what they're working. We had a company, Umbilizer, that was working on ventilators, right? Low cost portable ventilators, and they've been working on this for several years. And I mean, talk about being in the right place at the right time. But then we had other companies in terms of, diagnostic companies and even some drug discovery therapeutic companies very early on that have shifted focus. And, I think it's interesting. And, I think there's some caution also in terms of that needs to be taken in terms of shifting focus to COVID in terms of what else you might be focusing on or had been focusing on before. One, I think because of there's many irons in the fire already that are probably a bit further along. And then two, I think there's just a lot of uncertainty. It's almost a coin toss. Do we know if this is going to continue to be, a big problem where we need to continue to put resources and companies need to go work on this, or is this something that will be taken care of with a vaccine and not be so much an issue in a year or two? So I think for these earlier companies, it really is a risk. But there was something that was mentioned. I think what this really does in terms of highlighting the industry and academia and biopharma, it really highlights the need to have these conversations between both industry and academia very early on to really understand what each other's needs are and how we can really work together. But I think that this, if the silver lining of anything, it's really highlighted the importance and the value of creating those relationships early.
To both of our industry panelists, Michal and Aaron, we have a bunch of companies here at Lab Central as well who have pivoted or adopted a new program, I think mostly out of the desire to be helpful and to contribute to the solution for this problem. Of course, most of them are also venture capital funded, and they need to eventually create an upside for their investors and be profitable. So the question then becomes, how is that justifiable? Will there be an opportunity for them to have a product in there? So I think the question goes to you. Do you see interest, appetite from the side of the partnering groups at Big Pharma to buy into programs or to invest into programs to solve this, be it on the diagnostic, vaccine, or therapeutic side? Do you, any one of you that have you had discussions about bringing technology in?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can start. We definitely have. So first, I mean, we do have programs that are running that are feeding into kind of immediate interest in collaboration. And we have announced, for example, for our vaccine program, we have a collaboration locally with Dan Baruch, and we are definitely looking at multiple additional innovation ideas to support that, as well as other programs. We're screening through many just with the aim of being helpful and trying to provide guidance. We also definitely think about those things that will get accelerated thanks to the COVID environment, whether it's the need for diagnostics, digital support for operations, for clinical trials, and so on. I actually find that shifting to COVID serves a few very, very important needs for the innovator community. So the most creative, I would say, and there's a good example from Central that I with Nocion company that is very dear to my heart, pivoted from a cough program that was focused on chronic cough to COVID-related cough, and that enables continuing clinical trials, because there are COVID patients that can now, or the COVID context enables that. And I think it's brilliant. I think, and what is good about it is that it's not as if now the entire company has shifted to COVID. It just enables a shorter term opportunity for a platform that will continue to be broader. So I think that's beautiful. I think that PIs in the academic institutions have shifted to COVID to keep their labs working and open. And I think that the benefit of this has been that they just started this dialogue that Michael was mentioning because it was necessary. And now there is much more conversation that is happening about the needs that are related to translation and what it takes. And I think maybe we will see a whole new generation of scientific founders and entrepreneurs who will emerge from this experience, both because they're more incentivized and motivated to do it, and also because they just gained this experience. And once the virus attacks, it stays with you. I mean, the entrepreneurship virus this time.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And maybe the last comment that I will say about COVID, COVID has opened an opportunity for all of us to witness collaboration between pharma companies, between public and private. And I think this is something that was underappreciated, but in our own ecosystem, and this really relates to the scientific founder, kind of reality, we have all been collaborating, right? I mean, we have multiple big companies participate in Lab Central and in Kendall Square, and we all live in great harmony with each other, and we all make innovation better. So when J&J came to Kendall Square, it was with the intent to help build an ecosystem. It was not there to harvest an ecosystem. It was it was there to build, and as co-founders of Lab Central and in many other ways. And I think that has been very much the case for others. And I think we take kind of joint ownership in the task of mobilizing innovation and contributing to that, including mentoring of entrepreneurs, scientific founders from academia who are looking to make the transition and have all this access to expertise around town, which is available with a lot of love and care, not to to make the opportunity better and help accelerate it. So I think COVID shows this to the public. We live this every day here in Kendall.
I like the theme of collaboration. We see that a lot here. And also, in a way, the entrepreneurial pivot to a new opportunity like the one that you described with the cough company. I think that's the hallmark of good entrepreneurship, is that you adjust to the realities that are presented to you. And of course, many of the founders that we work with bring these properties with them. In terms of like, let's look at a world post-COVID. We'll hope that we'll overcome this. So back to basics, back to the work of translating and creating the best environment for academic science to be funneled into entrepreneurial ventures. Aaron, since you've worked for many years at an MIT Tech Transfer Office, which is one of the key leaders in this, we've talked a little bit about the properties that entrepreneurial leaders and founders need to bring. Can you elaborate a little bit on what makes a good startup? What in your practice, what have you seen be successful? What should faculty who are aspiring to become founders try to learn before they become founders? Can you give us a little bit of insights from your practice there?
Yeah, sure. And I think, the biotech industry is a direct result of academic research. Let's start there, right? I mean, you can go back to Cohn Boyer, you can go back, to even further to, not biotech, but sort of microbial engineering, so on and so forth. So I mean, it is, and you look at the great, the things that are now hitting the market, siRNA, right? That was a technology that was actually had just been disclosed right before I started at MIT back in 2002, right? And the first drug has now made it to the market, and now follow on and so on. So it's an incredibly, without academia, we are nothing. And I would say actually to some degree, at least in Boston and a lot of other areas, without industry, academia cannot sort of reach its fullest point as well. Because, as I always like to say, and this is sort of going to start answering your question, is focus on what you do well and really try to do that. And so when you're talking about sort of the startup, understand what is the key contribution that you have or key capability problem you can solve for a partner or in the market. And understand that really well and focus on that, because at the end of the day, investors and partners will want to see a very robust and strong rationale and also data around what you plan to do. So as a academic founder, there's a PI. I always sort of refer to it as the three-legged stool, and it's oftentimes that way, but not always. But you sort of oftentimes what I saw coming out of MIT was you had the PI who would remain in. Sorry, I'm getting my hand in the frame. The PI who would remain in their faculty position. Most do. A few do leave occasionally, but for the most part, they do stay. You have the founding team from the lab, which is usually the postdoc grad student, and sort of that. It could be one, it could be a couple people that were really the genesis of the work that went on in the lab and the project. And then the third thing is usually, and it's not always, but it's usually there's an entrepreneur who pulls it all together or who comes on a little later to really help give the focus. So that's the three-legged stool, and everyone on that stool does something really well. And usually there's some, but not a lot of overlap between the legs of that stool. And so that to me is where it's focus on where you can contribute. PIs are great at running labs. No offense, they're usually, except for a few very rare exceptions, not so great as CEOs. The founding team is really good at the science and driving the science, but they may not be so great at putting the strategy together for what the actual market and what the investors will want. And then the entrepreneur is usually not out there pipetting and running the experiments. They're actually thinking about sort of what the, where to focus the company and what the value proposition is for that company to both investors and to industry. And so it's kind of knowing what you can do well, and then really trying to capitalize on that as absolute much as possible.
As the former tech transfer officer shepherding many such technologies out of the university ecosystem, what are some of the learnings that you can describe for the institution? Because we work in many cities, not just Boston. I always say, like, we are blessed in Boston because we have enlightened tech transfer officers, right? They understand that their role is to facilitate the transition. But, we are also in other cities, and we're trying to do the same ecosystem building in places like Europe, where it really does seem to be behind by quite a bit in terms of the understanding. Are there best practices that you can share that would guide sort of what is successful in tech transfer? What is the best policy to adopt for an office to facilitate entrepreneurial?
Yeah, I think it's really just trying to make it as simple a process as possible. Because at the end of the day, I know Michal is, and every other company is, we're looking at multiple opportunities. And that's no surprise, right? And at the end of the day, you have to deliver on those opportunities. And if it's a really challenging, uphill fight, and you feel like this is a, it's kind of like a marriage. That's what my old boss said, is like, and if you're starting off on a bad foot, that's probably not a good sign. But if you have to realize with tech transfer offices, there'll be an ongoing relationship with that startup. So you need to make sure that you allow that startup to flourish and to have the flexibility that it needs to succeed. And, I think a lot of the offices are, at least MIT's philosophy when I was there, and I think it still is, and I think Harvard's is as well, it's like, you just play the numbers game, right? You're not trying to maximize every deal. That's a bad idea, because you spend all your time on one or two deals, and those may not hit. But if you can spread a lot of really sort of the portfolio approach, right? If you can spread a lot of bets and realize you don't know what the winners are unless you happen to have CRISPR, or you happen to have siRNA. But even then, sort of that's not necessarily, these technologies may not pan out. They may just go up in flames. So try to just do as many deals as possible and be the place that people want to go, because at the end of the day, success will breed success, and more entrepreneurs will know, listen, if it's sort of like the old adage in venture capital, right? They'd rather invest in an A team with a B technology than a B team with an A technology, right? It's kind of the same thing, right? Is that you're looking at both the office and what it's like to deal with them, and then also the technology that you're bringing out of it. And like you said, there are other ecosystems where you can go, and if you're agnostic to that ecosystem, you may say, you know what, they're paying, I'm not going to do it. So I think that making it a frictionless process, or as much as possible, is important.
Michael, Aaron mentioned how the team is oftentimes more important than the actual technology. I think that's in determining the success of a startup, right? That's something that the academic founders often don't see as clearly, right? They think they have this great biology, or they have developed this great technology, and now the world will come and pile onto that and will buy it from them. But there's a lot of team development really needed. Can you describe a little bit your activity around what you do at the iLab and at the Life Lab? And also, I don't know to what extent you can talk about the next trajectory. Is that still secret, or is that?
No, we can. HMS, the new Life Lab to be built. Yes. So no, I mean, this is priority number one. I mean, it's the most important piece of building a successful venture is the team, and we really espouse that and focus on that, and putting the right people in the right place at the right time. And it's what we do. It's really a part of what we focus on in the venture program at iLab, and it's going to be a central focus of what we will do with the new Harvard Medical School Life Lab Longwood, which is part of the new therapeutics initiative. I mean, I think everyone understands that team is absolutely the most valuable asset that you have, and building the right team is incredibly important. I think one part is also, having people that are, one, understand what they don't know, right? And that they don't know everything, and being willing to be teachable, and being willing to learn, and being willing to let go, right? When it's time to let go of your baby, and have the right person come in who's really able to build this thing out the right way and to the success. I think that also comes, realizing what the real value is at the early stage of your technology, and what it is you're building. It's not as maybe valuable as it seems to you. So there's a lot of kind of, internal bias that needs to be removed, and groupthink and such. And I think it's very common in academia. And when these external interactions begin to happen, you have to be able to really assess what real value is, and also know how to go build that value, right? And that may require, bringing in other folks and giving up pieces of what that is that you're building. So this is something that, I focus on, trying to teach the founders and providing these lessons. And, I think right now, the COVID era, we're kind of going through a lesson of learning this. And it's like the traditional push versus pull. And it's kind of like a real-time exercise that these entrepreneurs are going through. But it is something that, we find to be very important. I think there's part of this, though, is you've got to align the motivations of the scientific founders with the non-scientific types of founders, whether they're from venture or from industry, and understanding what everybody's motivations are, and why they're working on whatever technology that they're trying to build and develop. There's a lot of psychology to it, right? And I think also, being real with yourself and understanding that the likelihood of success is not very high. The likelihood of failure is very high. And I think really instilling that very early on with the founders, to understand that the likelihood that you will build this thing and go on to, save millions of lives and cure cancer or whatever, it is not very high, but you're likely to fail, and you're going to fail probably multiple times, but you need to learn how to learn from it. And I think, PhD students and postdocs and such, and folks, they're actually quite well suited to learn from they do that for most of their career and training. And that's another part that I also have tried to leverage and really allow these folks, a lot of the folks that we're training are founders who are postdocs and PhDs, and say, look, I mean, you've spent all these years failing, your experiments often don't work, but what do? You go back and you learn from those failures, right? So how can you apply that to being an entrepreneur?
Thank you, Michael. I did want to ask another question about the structure, and now that we define sort of the technology and the team, and maybe the founding scientific team and the business people coming in. Of course, in Boston, we have seen an evolution of the venture creation model. And Michal, in your partnering activities, there are these groups now, big venture funds that are sort of de novo creating companies. And I think that's a relatively new concept, has been around for certainly less than 10 years at sort of this big scale. Do you see it as a better alternative to the academic founders, or as an alternative? Like, does pharma have a preference for companies created either way?
Yeah. Well, I think that this is a great opportunity to catalog a little bit for the audience, and especially scientific founders or people who are interested in entrepreneurship in the audience, a little bit about what options they have, and then answer your question, I promise, Johannes. But I think Aaron and Michael definitely focused on the maybe prototypical startup where there is an idea or there is a discovery in the lab, a technology that it needs to be mobilized, and the startup is one option to do it, and it's very much PI or team driven and technology focused. In addition to that, there are broader platforms that bring multiple PIs together, right? So maybe a good example of the first would be eGenesis from George Church's lab, or I2O from Samir Mitragordi lab, where it's a single technology, a single PI, and in contrast to this, there's Editas, right, that has George Church, but also David Liu and Feng Zheng, broad IP from multiple institutions. But there is also reverse, right, where, as you said, Johannes, for example, Third Rock came up with the idea that they're going to start a hearing loss company, Decibel, and then they go shopping for, a talented, scientific founders and technologies that can populate this concept. And there are other venture do this similarly. So for a scientific founder who wants to be involved in entrepreneurship, I just want to say you don't always have to do it with your own technology. You can actually become a member of a team that maybe start with a scientific advisory board position or in this broader team and gain that experience without going all in. I mean, this is just one possibility. I don't recommend or don't recommend. I'm just saying that there are these multiple opportunities. I think that what is the most important is the fit of the structure to what we're trying to do here. And just in terms of the factors for success, I see three. The first one is really just alignment on the vision for the company and the technology. And this is at the individual level and also in the three-legged stool. When everybody understands, the investors and the management team, the tech transfer and the PI, they all understand where we're going. It's much easier to now go to step two, which is acknowledge the contributions that everybody's making. And there is mutual education needed, I think, in both directions. So I think that investors sometimes underestimate the depth of effort that has preceded this, CRISPR thingy that, we're bringing to the table. Whereas many times the scientific founder doesn't appreciate the tremendous investment and the very, very long journey that awaits and the many hurdles that need to be overcome. But finally, the third component is really trying to understand and address the needs for each one of those. And so for industry, it's clear that the company launching needs to know that it has access and is enabled with all of the ingredients that are needed for success. It's IP, it's talent from the lab, it's materials, it's know-how, all of these things that it cannot live without. Sometimes it's access to improvements to make sure that, next week there will not be a better thing that makes this company obsolete. For the PI, they need to know that they can continue, especially, if they stay in the lab, they need to know that their entire future is not now tied to this one company, because they need to be able to continue getting grants and maybe having other industry collaborations to enable other ideas. And so all of these things, if one can develop the trust and have a conversation about that particular case and what is really needed, and make sure that everybody's kind of living out of the gate with what is important for them, I think that really makes the journey much more successful for everyone. As Aaron said, in quoting Lida, every investor and every management team will come back to that tech transfer office about 20 to 25 times in the history, the future history of the company, to ask for something. And so it better, start kind of on the right foot. So hopefully this is helpful.
Thank you for your insights, Michal, there. I realize that I've lost track of time in our discussion, and we only have like 5 minutes left for the audience questions, but I have a whole screen full of audience questions that I owe the audience to put to you. So we have to do sort of quick responses, and whoever volunteers first. Let me read one that I have here. Does the current state of things with COVID mean more people are available over Zoom and might be interested in hearing from companies in different geographies? That's part one. The second part of this question is loaded, which means how does it affect Cambridge, and have we priced ourselves out of the game? Because it's of course more expensive to do it here. Any one of you wants to answer this one? Aaron.
I'll take it, and I'll say, yes, you can definitely get more people on to talk to things. I would say no about Cambridge, because the reason Cambridge has been so successful in the past is not the fact that you are in a building. It's that I will see Michal around the corner, I'll bump into Michael on the street. I will see Johannes, getting a cup of coffee. And it's those things that are unpredictable that actually, and that I can actually, sort of walk down the street and go to Guppy Tank. And all those other things are just so intangible, which make things happen, and Mass Bio and everyone else. So I think Zoom can only go so far, and it's great. It's been a wonderful tool, but I can tell you from what I do and wanting to, I talked to Michael yesterday. I was like, Michael, I look forward to us having lunch at the Glass House when this all ends, right? And what that means is that there's a human element to it and a certain serendipity that you can't get through Zoom. I'll leave it at that.
I don't want to allow anybody to comment over that, because that's the hopeful thing for after COVID, that we'll all actually benefit from this. Next question here. How do you get an industry partner to sponsor an early stage but promising research without taking majority ownership to build a startup in partnership with the founders? So here's the sensitivity that we venture capitalists often are seen as too greedy. How do you answer that?
I'll say one thing real fast. I think it's part of it is understanding that it's better to have 1% of $1 billion than 100% of $100, right? And that's all. And I think there's some understanding of that concept that needs to be required.
Yeah. So I nothing to add here. I think it's if it's the right partnership and the long-term vision is aligned and your needs are addressed, then don't be greedy about dilution. This is I don't think it is the right, the most important thing.
And I would also say there are things that partner can bring that you will never be able to do on your own. And there's a back engine that's there that you will never be able to appreciate. And so I think it's vitally important, and it's the model. I think there are a few companies that can do it. Some of these really big venture-backed companies that can do it, but for the most part, I think it's a really important part of the process. And I think it's actually what's made biotech so important to pharmas and to academia.
Maybe I'll give a plug into big pharma here and the big companies. Corporate venture groups are rarely interested in taking majority ownership, and so they are good partners in that respect, and they offer an alternative or a way to syndicate, which is how we really love to do this. But it may create that counterbalance if the worry is really not dilution but control. I think it's a good way to create more balance and focus on long-term product and stuff like that. Back to you.
So again highlighting sort of the fact that any successful such company will have been a collaboration of many parts and not just the
oftentimes
founder.
Yes.
I think this is going to be our last question. How can we overcome the implicit bias in our academic institutions? What it means, it's gender bias. Institutions and contribute to tech transfer and VC investment where there's less than 5% investment for VC for female-founded newcos. What have you seen work? Have you had initiatives around that, and how can we address it? Is really the question.
Personally, I think we need to push, for initiatives that would, allow for more women and minorities to go into engineering, science, STEM fields, right? I think it really starts with the education, in my opinion. How can we promote education across women and minorities?
I think the other thing is, and I think it was Mass Bio that started this, was the program for training board members and helping provide. So I think it's sort of providing that education that maybe depending on where you are in the country, if you're in Boston, you can ask the person down the hall how they started a company, right? But if you're not in that environment, or you're not, in a part of the country where it's possible, it's sort of creating a platform that would allow for that sort of education and the know-how on how to do it. And again, that's sort of the democratizing of it or flattening of it.
Really broad question, and I think there are many factors that feed into this. Where I kind of found myself most focused as a former tech transfer person is in the choices that women make in academia to opt out because they're very busy with their academic work. They want to get home. They don't want to do business dinners. There are multiple things that that I was kind of focused on, and I think that the conversation has to continue, and I'm very passionate about this. There are multiple initiatives around town, but I definitely would love to take part in all of those discussions and try to address.
Very good. Thank you. We are out of time. I'm grateful for your insight and contributions this afternoon, and I hope to continue the conversation soon in Kendall Square in person over a cup of coffee or a beer. Thank you, and stay tuned for the next. I don't think we have an announcement for the next event, but we'll feed that through our social media soon to come. Thanks again for your participation, to the panel and the audience. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Johannes. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, and thanks for keeping innovation labs open and just all of us proceeding with our work. Thank you.
We'll do that. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.